And John Lovar. We're going to start off with some introductions. You should be seeing our screen now, and we're just going to switch over to the introduction slide. So I want to start off by introducing myself, and I thought it would be interesting for you all to know how the most common phrases that we say. So I'm Julie, this stuff is so cool, Holmes, and I am the J.D. Edwards Product Manager here at insightsoftware.com. This budgeting topic is quite near and dear to my heart. My background is as a J.D. Edwards financials consultant for a number of years. I was also a financial systems manager for an XE customer site, so J.D. Edwards Enterprise One or One World if you go back that far. And I was also a senior product manager at Oracle and PeopleSoft and J.D. Edwards, depending on which year, for the Enterprise One Financials product. And, of course, as a customer, I actually bought the insightsoftware.com product, so that's how I actually knew about the application. And then I wanted to also share what was the most common thing that we either heard or said as John and I were putting together this presentation. And for me, as a systems manager, it was definitely, how hard can it be to get this stuff loaded in JDE? After all, what's taking you so long? I should have had it yesterday, as I'm trying to correct 1 million account numbers and line everything back up. So it's obviously something that I've had some significant experience with in terms of making the budgeting process smooth from the system side. So over to John to introduce himself.
Thank you, Julie. I am John, not a sales guy, Lovar, former CPA for Ernst & Young, and once an accounting manager of financial reporting long ago. But in these days, I see myself more as a spokesperson for traditional accountants out there, and I'm a strong advocate for what you're going to see today with regard to all the new budgeting functionality, especially some of the new integration technologies that we've been deploying now. So that's me, and we can proceed.
And what about your budgeting quote, John?
Oh, yes, my budgeting quote. So most importantly, what do you mean you've used version 72 of the spreadsheet? I've sent you 17 new versions since then. This is a typical problem that I've run into not only at or in my own historical experience, but at many other customer sites. And I'm hoping to expose that today through the webinar and then show you how that's changed significantly.
So a little bit about insightsoftware.com. First of all, it's a dynamic global company. We have over 500 customers representing over 30,000 users around the world. And our entire focus as an organization is on improving the ERP systems that our customers rely on to run their business. Our products are all about solving core business problems for J.D. Edwards and for Oracle eBusiness Suite, and things that get in the way of people doing their jobs, like inquiry reporting, reconciliations, budgeting, analytics, and data integrity management. Today's session, of course, is focused on J.D. Edwards budgeting, so that's primarily what we're going to be talking about. We're all about providing simple solutions to complex business challenges, and some of our tenets include direct access in real time. There's no staging or duplication of the data, so it looks directly at J.D. Edwards to report on actuals as well as to bring back budgets and that full interaction. It's a true end-user tool. There's no technical tool masquerading as an end-user product. This is all about people like John being able to do their job. And it's fast and easy to use with great performance and minimal training required. There's no lengthy implementation. Even for reporting or budgeting, it's very much plug and play, and it's working against your live J.D. Edwards ERP system usually within an hour. And the goal of all of it is to simplify the business. We absolutely see our product and everything about it as being something that streamlines the business process. So just a little bit about our organization. And now that we've gone through that, the next thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to spend just a little bit of time getting to know you, the people that are on our call. We have a great turnout today, so thank you for all of the people. And what I wanted to do is just take a second and to kind of ask some poll questions. We have, I think, 3 or 4 poll questions, and we're actually going to share the results. So first, I'm going to start off by asking everybody what products you use for budgeting and forecasting today. And this is a multi-select, so not a hard test. You won't fail if you get it wrong, but you can check as many of these as are appropriate. So just take a moment, if you would, and let us know which ones of these you select, either J.D. Edwards, Microsoft Excel, or do you use a third-party budgeting tool or any combination of the above. So we're getting there. We've got about 75% of our attendees have voted. You You guys are obviously paying attention. Thank you for that. Great, and you can just answer by clicking on your screen. So you just have to click on your screen, and great. We've almost got everybody, so let me go ahead and I'm going to close the poll in just a second. Last chance. You guys might also be interested to see what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, it's tracking to expectations, I think.
Yeah, I think it's exactly what I would have expected as well. So I'm going to close the poll now, and I'm going to share those results. So as you can see on your screen, about 52% of people are writing their budgets into JD Edwards. 83% are using Microsoft Excel, which is very typical. And about 23% are still using some kind of a third-party budgeting tool to supplement what they're doing in Excel and in JD Edwards. So very good. Okay, so the next question that's going to come up. Let me turn off those poll results for a second. So the next thing we want to know, and this is actually going to help John and I during the presentation, is we want to know how often you do your budget or forecast. Now we know that most customers are obviously doing an annual budget. Again, this is a multi-select, so you can let us know first that you're doing annual, but also if you're doing it more frequently than that. Are you doing it semi-annually, quarterly, monthly, or some other frequency? It could be weekly or bi-weekly or daily if you're really motivated.
Exactly.
So let's see what kind of answers we're getting. Very good. We're getting very nice quick responses. You guys are very good on the uptake here. As you can see, we're visiting our downtown London location right now. You'll be pleased to know that siren's not stopping here. Excellent. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close this poll and share those results with everybody. So we've got 83% that are doing an annual budget, which is very typical, of course. Not so many people doing semi-annual, lots of people doing quarterly and monthly, and a few other people that are doing something different. If you have a second and don't mind typing in, you can type it in as a question or a chat to the moderator. If you're doing something other than something in the other category, feel free to send us a little message and let us know what it is. You know, John and I are always quite interested in finding out how people are leveraging budgeting and what they're doing with it. So feel free to share those details with us too. Great. And the next question that we're going to ask, so now we're getting an idea about what you're doing and how often you're doing it. The next thing we want to know is how long is it taking you? So let's just talk about your annual budget for a moment. And what we really want to know is how long from start to finish is it taking you to do that annual budget? And that's from determining what your actuals are to creating your forms, all the way up to getting all of your users to input their results, going through approval processes, and then determining from that, getting all that information wrapped back up and perhaps back into JD Edwards where you can report on it and you would describe the process as completely finished. So not just the budget input, but everything from start to finish. And I don't know about you guys, but of course John and I are watching the poll with bated breath, so waiting to see what the results are.
I am in suspense.
Excellent. We've got almost everybody in now. They're getting so quick at answering now. Look, everybody's fascinated. We're getting more percentage of responses with every question. We might just do this the whole webinar. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share those results. So 4% of you are getting it through in less than a month.
Very good.
And 1 to 3 months, that's really quite good actually. So having 50% of you doing 1 to 3 months is great, but obviously you have a feeling that it can be improved or you wouldn't be attending this webinar. 4 to 6 months, it's quite a few people that are taking almost, anywhere from a quarter to half a year to get in their annual budget. And I'm a little worried about our 9% that are spending more than 6 months doing their budget. And I can definitely understand why you've attended today's webinar.
And I can attest that we're not logged in and putting that in ourselves. There's actually someone out there that is more than 6 months. So
yeah, 9% of our attendees, so that's more than one person for sure. We have a lot of people on the call. So excellent. So I'm going to go ahead and hide those results. I hope you found those questions kind of interesting. Certainly it's interesting for us. And the other thing that we want to know is before we get into the actual pains that John and I have identified, the last question that we have is what's your budgeting pain today? So obviously this is about how to have a painless budgeting process. And John and I sat down and came up with a list of 5 things that we think express the greatest frustrations that customers might have in the process. So we've opened up this poll, and we've tried to make the answers a little more interesting. I've tried to make the answers a little more interesting so that you're at least slightly entertained while you read it.
They all look familiar to me.
Yeah, they're all things that we've experienced. So obviously the first part is creating and managing budget forms and processes could be a complete burden to you. You might be buried under a pile of Excel workbooks. It could just be taking too long to budget. I'm assuming that's going to be our 9%.
For sure.
I can't see consolidated budgets until it's all done, so you have no visibility. And it's so bad, I don't even know where to start. And I'm loving that question is actually getting answered. People are picking that one. Great. Anybody else? Just a few more seconds before I close this poll. Here's your big chance to share your pain with the rest of the attendees on the call today, and we can all commiserate.
That's fantastic.
Great. All right. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And I'm going to share those results so that you guys can start to see many of the same things that we've seen. So obviously the process, interestingly enough, I kind of typed these in the order that I thought it was going to be, and there you go. I was pretty spot on. Creating and managing the budget forms and process, 76%. Half of you are buried under a pile of Excel workbooks, so we know that it sounds like it's nearly everybody who's using Excel.
Yes.
It takes too long to budget. What's interesting, of course, is we saw that there was a good response in terms of the length of time that it was taking people to do their budgets, but half of you still feel like that process is too long, so there's definitely room for improvement. Not being able to see the consolidated budgets until it's all done, and it's so bad you don't even know where to start to answer this question. Totally understandable.
We're here for you.
Yeah, we get it. We totally feel your pain. So thank you very much for taking a second to let us get to know you better. And again, feel free to type in questions. I'm going to be monitoring the questions, and we're going to try to answer those throughout, but depending on how involved we are in doing the webinar, we might have to look at those toward the end. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to the presentation. And this is, first we're going to talk about actually what the 7 pain points are. And you would have gotten this actually in the webinar invitation. So the 7 secrets to painless and quick and painless budgeting. And you'll notice there's little asterisks there, and that's according to Julie and John. 2011, just so that you know what year that we we've created this list. First is the need to be able to automate the budgeting workflow. The second is to be able to define the participants, including contributors and approvers. Third is to be able to use flexible budget forms with real-time actuals, budgets, and forecasts all in one place. We also have a need to have intelligent modeling with Excel integration, immediate access and quick consolidation of budgets. We want to be able to maintain visibility and control from start to finish. That makes a big difference in how painless our budgeting process is. And then the last step of the budget is sometimes the hardest, being able to directly upload that information into the JD Edwards ERP system. So let's look at each one of these in detail. First, automating the budget workflow. The objectives of an organization that's looking to automate the budgeting workflow is that they want first a single solution that supports budgeting, forecasting, and strategic planning all in one place. And they also want the ability to define and manage those processes. The benefits that a company gets from all of that is, first of all, faster cycles. So all of those, half of you out there said that you want to be able to budget faster, and that's one of your major concerns. Well, this is the first step in that. Being able to see what's happening and to be able to manage the workflow of that will result in faster cycles. Also, improved control and audit trails, and being able to actually have more realistic plans. What's interesting, and what we didn't ask and probably should have, is how many of you find pain in that your budgets don't necessarily represent what's happening in the business. For those of you that are taking 4, 5, 6, 8, 9 months to budget, you are obviously experiencing this if you're only doing an annual budget, because as soon as you create your annual budget, you're working off of numbers that haven't even happened yet, and they're not going to be correct. So your budgets are directly impacted with that. So what I want to do now is I'm going to change the screen over, and John's going to show you a little bit about how we find this process to become more painless with Insight budgeting. So we're going to switch over really quick to our Insight budgeting product.
Thank you, Julie. Yeah, so one thing that I've always looked for as an experienced accountant is the ability to get to my budgeting environment quickly and easily and consistently. So what I can do within Insight is utilize our activities button here and get right into where we're seeing a very high-level view of our entire budget environment. Now that budget environment can consist of a variety of areas of activities. In particular on this screen you can see this environment includes a basic environment, a forecast environment, a budget environment, and so forth and so forth. Each one of these environments is unique and has its own purpose, and I'm sure many of you are quite familiar with maybe some of these activities. If you open up these activities, you'll be able to see more clearly exactly what's going on in your budgeting realm. So for example, looking at 01 forecast, I can see that I have set up in my environment 3 specific forecast cycles that I can easily control. Now I can quickly see here by way of the icons what's closed and what's open, so that's an easy indicator for me. But I also have the ability to come in here and very simply open or close a cycle just by the click of a button. So as a budget administrator, that's one of the things that I always worried about, was the ability to make sure that no changes were occurring while I was in my forecast and reporting particular information, maybe up the chain to CFO or board members. And that's really one of the primary benefits that you see from this screen is the ability to control and view all of your activity cycles and elements, and also all of the setup that's involved. It's all in this one simple window. So I think that's what I have to say about managing the workflow at this stage.
Great. Well, let's go back and talk about the next pane, or the next way that we can make painless budgeting. So that's robust workflows. Next up, we have the ability to be able to define participants, including contributors and approvers. So when we look at the budgeting process, one of the big challenges is that people have a need to incorporate and involve the budget stakeholders in the entire process. There are a lot of organizations when the budgeting process is hard, and I've certainly been in companies like this, that you just stop involving the business in those kind of day-to-day budgeting activities and the forecast, because the overhead of just getting them involved and creating forms that they can understand and getting those forms out to them and getting that feedback back in, all of that is just so cumbersome that you can't possibly involve the entire business every single time, or the right people in the business every single time. So the result of that is that you start to make assumptions, or you start to kind of fill in the blanks on behalf of the business. And what you really need to be able to do is to identify the participants, including the contributors and approvers. And what that results in is it starts to establish some accountability, and you're able to enforce that budget ownership and approval. So the business starts to feel very connected to their budgets. They see what's happening. They are part of that whole process, and you're getting more accurate budgets because you have those people involved. John's going to show a little bit of that here next. So I'm going to toggle back over so John can talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, now I'm going to stress that accountability notion that Julie just mentioned. I'm a big fan of being able to hold people accountable for their particular roles and responsibilities within the budgeting procedures. So very quickly, let me show you how we manage that with Insight. I'm going to open up a cycle or a budget activity that has one cycle in here. And when I go in, I'm going to edit that. I'm going to show you the participants that we've designed for this basic budget demo or demonstration. Now what we can see down at the bottom here are what we call contributors. And a contributor is an individual who's responsible for entering in budget data into the budget environment. And then above a contributor, for example, my contributors here are Mary, Paul, and Robert. They report to Robert Johnson. Now Robert Johnson is designated, if we close these up, you can see he's designated as an approver. In the Insight world, an approver is the one that's responsible for reviewing the contributor submissions and either rejecting or approving them so that they can be later uploaded into JD Edwards. Their role is just that, to approve or reject. They're not allowed to make any contributions without specifically communicating to the participants if you choose to set them up that way. So we're making sure that everyone has clear roles within the budget process and is communicating as they need to. If the approver finds they need to make a change, they need to reject the form, push it back down to the contributor level, and communicate the changes that are necessary. And so once we get to the approver level and everything has been signed off, the last step is to forward that information to the controller of the budget environment, who here we've identified as Phil Smith, and allow that user to finally, ultimately upload that permanent information from the Insight environment into JD Edwards if they choose to. Now, it's not something that they have to do, but if they choose, they can do that. And so that's our participant structure.
Excellent. So let's look at our next pain point. Our next pain point, or the way that we help to make budgeting more quick and painless, is through dynamic budget forms. And what's interesting is this, of course, came up in our survey, our polls at the beginning, that a lot of people, nearly half, I think, were feeling kind of overwhelmed by the creation of the forms and the management of the forms. So the first part of having a form is first to have the right information on it. And that means you need to be able to access and use real-time actuals and budgets and forecasts in a budget form. That way, as I'm changing numbers, John's seeing the right information. As actuals are changing, again, I'm getting the right information in there to look at my actuals. And it's also even about being able to drill down and not only see the actuals just on the budget form, but even being able to drill down and see the actuals. One of the things that used to happen a lot where I used to work, and John, I'm sure you had the same situation, was that we'd send out budgeting information in a spreadsheet, for example, and the first thing that would happen is those users would call into the accounting department and say, yeah, I saw this number on my budget form, and I don't really understand where it came from. So can you please research this number and come back and tell me why my travel and expenses were so high last year? I don't remember that we used that much, and my actuals seem high. So, accounting would have to go off, research that, provide that information back to the user, and it wasn't very self-service, and it was a real gap in the process. So that was definitely one of the challenges that we were facing. So having that drill down is very valuable, and creating forms that are dynamic so that instead of having to rebuild your budgeting process every single year, you can just change it. Same thing with your forecast, right? Instead of having to recreate forecasts every single month, you can just change dynamic variables so that you can kind of fill in the blanks as you go along with the right information. And the benefits to all of this is, first, improved user adoption. Let's face it, our budget stakeholders are not interested in becoming budgeting geniuses. All they want to do is get their budgets in and get on with everything else they have to do, and we should be doing everything we can to support them. It also reduces input errors, and as I said, as a systems manager, this was definitely where I felt the most effect, because the more spreadsheets that I sent out, the more errors that came back with it. It was interesting how they were correlated. And that meant that I spent a lot of time doing data cleanup or trying to figure out what the user meant by it, and did they really mean that this was going to be a total number or not a total number. And finally, I have a more accurate basis for those forecasts. So again, keeping those actuals information in real time and not working off of staged data makes my budgeting process more honest and more accurate. John, you want to talk about what that looks like in Insight?
Yeah, I sure do. Julie is dead on. I have seen this time and again, especially as my role as product specialist here at Insight. I've seen many customers out there struggle with the problem of coming up with an end-of-year forecast. And whenever I see that, I always drop in the report that you can see on my screen right now, which very easily assembles that end-of-year forecast information for you within the Insight environment. So typically what will happen is your end user will go out there and they'll data extract right out of JD Edwards, pull that data into kind of an Excel environment and try to assemble 6 months of actuals and maybe another 6 months of original budget information that all consolidates into a final end-of-year forecast. And that's what I have here in this form. I'm showing it to you simply by way of an income statement. You're looking at an expanded income statement for direct revenue. I can open and close these and you can see all of the individual components of my summary subtotals. But what I want to show you is how easy it is now to input forecast information. So put yourself in my situation. I have 11 months of actuals displayed here, and then I'm going to forecast my December Q4 for 2006. And what you'll notice on the far right, I have some dynamic calculations that will automatically update after I input my forecast information. So watch these columns for Q4 and total the original budget, and variance, they're all going to update as soon as I update my forecast information. So I'm going to go ahead and enter in some new information for my forecast. And I'm just going to play with this first line, and I'm going to increase it $1,734,000. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and write that information to my custom ledger stored in Insight. So go ahead and save that data. Now watch these calculations automatically update. We had a variance there of 4.1 million. It's going to go ahead and rerun. And very easily you're going to find out what caused that variance. Okay, so there we can see I've dropped it down to a $1.7 million variance just by entering my new forecast information, which I may have gathered by polling some of the individuals at my organization or just reading the newspaper. Now, one other thing about the dynamic capabilities of Insight here, I'm going to expand some of the setup just to show you how easy it is to change this information. For example, if we're done forecasting for this year and maybe we've completed the month of December and we're ready to report actuals, all I need to do is drop down the selector here and select my actual ledger type for the month of December. That's going to update my columns and instantly give me updated information. And I think that speed and real-time performance, all that information at your fingertips, is key to a successful budget environment.
Cool. So let's talk about the next item on our list. The next item on our list is intelligent Excel modeling. Now, we do have some customers on the call today, so I know you're going to be excited about this. It's a new feature that we've been working on, and we've pulled in some of the greatest minds in our company as well as our customers to come up with what we think is a great solution. We know that customers want to be able to leverage the robust modeling options that are available in Microsoft Excel, but like you said, you're buried under a pile of Excel workbooks and there's risks associated with that. And so it was all about finding a really great solution and building a great solution that allows you to leverage that Microsoft Excel robust functionality while still mitigating the risks. And when we are able to do this, as we can in the Insight Budgeting Summer 2011 release, it means that we can take advantage of the complex model and driver calculations and the functionality of Excel. We're still leveraging that user security and being intelligently connected. Now, this is something that John's obviously quite passionate about. So,
Yeah.
John, what would you add to that?
Well, I'd like to show it if I could, but this is one of those areas where I truly believe that I am a spokesperson for accountants. Here at Insight, there's a lot of IT technical people, and I've benefited from the ability of me to have direct contact with those people who are designing these tools from an accountant's perspective. And I've kind of taken my experience, my pain points from the past, and communicated that to them, and they've come up with a brilliant solution that I honestly have not seen in any other tool out there today. So I think I'm going to switch over, if that's all right, Julie.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just demonstrate how easy it is to do modeling these days using Insight. So I've designed a brief summary report just to sort of show you how modeling works within Insight, and let me lay the groundwork here. This is a budget input form that someone might design. Now, fortunately, I designed it, and I don't work in a real organization, so in my particular world, I only have 3 accounts. One for revenue, one for standard cost of sales, and one for rent. Now, what I'm going to do is design or input my budget information using several assumptions and then applying a specific model. So what I'm going to do is enter in a budget, and I've already primed this budget initially with a $16 million budget amount that is spread over each of the periods for next year's budget based on prior year's actual results. So I've taken this 16 million, that's the number that I inputted, and Insight has gone ahead and allocated these amounts out to each of the periods according to the model that I have working behind the scenes, built in Excel, but stored in Insight and controllable by me. And just to show you how this works, I'm going to go ahead and enter the budget now. And I'm going to change my budget amount from 16 million to 17 million. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and save that, And I'm going to go down to my next line item, which is considered standard material cost of sales. Now this line item is specifically driven by a rule that I've applied in my Microsoft Excel model. And it's basically a calculation that takes 25% of my forecasted budgeted revenues. And so what's going to happen is I'm going to hit my Apply Model button, and then I'm going to select my model. And it's going to go ahead and apply the rule of percentages that I've already established. And so here you can see that the formulas have been applied. I'm going to come out of my budget. And now you can see that I've got my updated standard cost of materials at 25% of revenue spread across all of my months based on the revenue stream that I initially forecasted in the line above. I know that's typical, that's how I used to budget, so I'm hoping that that strikes a chord. Now the third line that I have here is a rent line, and again that's just an amount that I put into the budget using that inner budget functionality. But that I set up in my model to be spread evenly across all periods. So you can see that rule being applied here. And if I go ahead and do it once more, I'm going to do it this time on Business Unit 303 just to show you that it's completely flexible. I'm going to go ahead and save that. Now that was formally spread by about 4,000 per month. I'm going to go ahead and apply the model once more. And there you can see that my months have been updated. I'm going to come out of that. And you'll see very easily how that model has been refreshed in the new results. So I've got exactly a 1% targeted margin percent, which is what I was sort of shooting for. And I'll analyze that in the next section here after Julie gives her next.
So a couple of points that I think are worth adding here. The first one is that as soon as John has entered those budgets, we can see those anywhere, and we're going to show that in a minute, but this is that collaborative environment. So John has entered a number, now that number is available to me if I was looking up that information, or to anybody in our organization for consolidated reporting or otherwise, and we'll mention that, but there was a question about it. The other question that I'm seeing quite a bit of here in our chat dialogue is people are asking a little bit about the comments. So did you want to point out the comments just for a second?
Yes. So in the new release of Insight, we've added the functionality to create your own comment columns and type in whatever information you would like. So by way of using our inner comment feature, you can just turn that on and go ahead and key in rent increase due to new location. And it works the same way as our budget data. As we finish our comment, we can go ahead and deselect that. It's going to write it to the Insight repository, and it's going to store that information in this report. Now, when any other user opens up this report, they'll go ahead and see that comment information, and they can amend to it or add or insert new comments if they choose to.
Right, and you can have multiple comment columns on the same form, so I can have comments for my contributors and comments for my approvers. And there was a question about how many characters it holds. A lot. But I can get you a more detailed answer than that if you want. But we've done paragraphs and quite long examples, and there's wrapping. And yes, they will print and export to Excel just to answer some of those questions. And the other thing that I would add as well about comments is that they're meant to kind of give you that extra window into the business. So that's a little bit of information about that. Comments are stored with the report because that's the exact combination that goes with it. So they're at a report level. And you can certainly do comments at a title, like if you wanted to put a comment on Denver on this report, you absolutely could, or even on the total line. So those comments can be done at detailed lines or at the subtitle or subtotal level.
Absolutely. And I would add one more thing here. It's difficult to see, but you could create a form that is sent out to multiple users, and those users can use the form just like you saw me display it, but we do integrate with JD Edwards Security, so that form may be restricted. If a specific user is only responsible for Business Unit 302, then only that business unit will appear for data entry. So we're managing the budget process by way of one form, but integrating with JD Edwards Security as well, so that users are only seeing the information that applies to them and nobody else.
So a couple other questions that came in that I think are worth talking about while we're on this particular form. The first of them is, how might this relate to job cost budgeting? So you want to talk about job cost budgets for just a second?
Yeah, I mean, really there's no difference from my perspective between the functionality that I'm showing here in the general ledger versus job costing. We're going to use the same basic environment, and we're going to set up our own forms, and we're just going to tailor those forms to the requirements that one might have from a job cost perspective versus a standard general ledger corporate reporting perspective. So everything's going to work the same. You're just going to set up your input forms a little bit differently.
Excellent. And then the other thing that somebody had asked, I just want to point out, you can of course make your comments inputtable if you were to go into the enter budget mode as well. So at the same time you're typing in your numbers, you can also be typing in comments. The enter comments option is available for if I've closed the entry of numbers, but there's still dialogue going on about my budget. I can also use enter comments to just continue to have that dialogue even after the numbers have closed. So I don't want people changing numbers, but there's still an opportunity for my contributors and my improvers and even my controllers to have some dialogue going back and forth about that. So I think that's a little bit of information there. And then there's some questions about using non-financial drivers to do calculations and models.
Sure. Yeah, you can use any type of driver that you require. I've set these models up using unit drivers, headcount, square footage. It's all possible. We're really using the engine of Excel, but we're taking that Excel engine and we're incorporating it within the Insight environment. So whatever you can do in Excel, you can utilize in your existing budget environment today. So nothing's going to change from that perspective. Now where you get that, maybe you want to store that driver information using an Insight ledger and then incorporate that with your Excel model. That's all doable. It's just a configuration setup inconvenience.
Perfect. So let's go back, and again I'm trying to watch your questions, and we'll do a little bit of question answer at the end too. I'll check them at the end to see what other questions are coming up. But let's move on from this over to the ability to immediately access the budget. And we certainly alluded to this when John was showing him typing in those numbers. So the real objective here is to be able to report on budgets and actuals at the time that they're entered, whether it's before, during, or after the process is complete. I need to have some visibility into that. And that's about also extending it to seeing budgets in real reports. So let's assume that we have 100 people that are keying in budgets in our organization. Well, I want to be able to see that from a finance perspective. Well, what does that look like in a profit and loss, at a consolidated profit and loss level? If I'm looking at an income statement or even a balance sheet, if I'm doing that degree of budgeting, then I want to be able to look at that information and report on it. The benefits, of course, are faster validation of budgeting entry. We know that, as many of you pointed out during our polls at the beginning, that seeing those consolidated results are a real challenge. And what happens is that we have all these people contributing to the budget. Well, we don't know that our plan isn't really good or our assumptions aren't great until we get all those numbers back and look at the bottom line and go, well, you know what, that's not going to give us or meet our corporate goals. So we're going to have to send the budgets back to everybody and ask them to adjust their entry so that we can try to meet our corporate goals. We could be monitoring and managing that throughout the process. We could even be looking for variances, exceptional variances, during the budget entry cycle when we have some users that have got their input in and other users that haven't. So actually monitor exceptions during rather than just at the end. And that's, of course, all about slicing, dicing, and analyzing. And it enables us to see the business instead of the budget lines. Budget lines are great. We obviously have to have them. But at the end of the day, we really want to see the organization as a whole and how we're succeeding. John?
Yeah, perfect. You've set the stage for me. It's like we actually prepared for this.
It's almost like that, isn't it?
All right. So I'm going to take this one step further using that same input form I was showing you before with the model, and I'm going to take it to a much higher level. So again, with a scenario in place here, we've got multiple users inputting information into Business Unit 302 and 303. Now we can see on this input form, if we're targeting a specific profit margin, we're equaling 1%. But we don't very easily know what our total variance percentage is across the entire organization for product A revenues, or for cost of sales, or for rent. So what I'm going to do is use our linking functionality, and I'm just going to follow a quick link that I've built to answer the question, is the budget aligned with global goals and objectives? What that's going to do is open up another report that I pre-built, and I put some interesting exception conditional formatting rules into this report so that I can now look at my input information at a summary level. You'll see that I don't have business unit on this report any longer. It's a full consolidation of my revenues, cost of sales, and rent. And we can see that I've got my variance percentages by line item now in consolidation. So very easily I can see how we're doing in the budget process at any point in time as people are entering in that budget information. Now you'll notice the one line here, 7,400 rent, is highlighted in red, and that's because I've applied a rule that says there are no changes greater than 10%. And here you can see this is one line item that has a greater than 10% situation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my number. I'm going to go back to the original input form and just quickly enter in hopefully a correction that will fix that for us. And we'll go ahead and save that. Apply the model once more so I can get my appropriate monthly spread. And then I'm going to go ahead and come out of my budget.
And before you go on, John, I want to point out too, you all saw kind of that message box pop up. That's presenting feedback to John about the success of the model application. So it's letting him know, hey, these are the intersections that we found and that we updated. Here's what we didn't find, so that the user is kind of aware of what's happening.
Yeah, and that's one of the most powerful features. Again, one of the features that I've never seen in another reporting tool whatsoever. So we're taking this far beyond reporting and into the budgeting world where users really need it. So let me go back now to that consolidated budget form, and let me update it just by simply pressing F5 or the run button here. And we're going to see these numbers change. I didn't fix it good enough, but I am no longer at a negative 20%, I'm at a positive 12% situation. So I can continue to play with that if I need to, but the obvious benefit here is that I'm looking at results in consolidation in real time as the budget is being updated.
And of course, we're seeing this just from John's perspective, but this is true from anybody. So anybody that has access to Insight reporting or Insight budgeting is able to look at all that information. Console as well, which is that viewer application, or even Budgeting Lite if they're inputting budgets. So the next quick and painless budgeting tip that we have is all about maintaining visibility and control from start to finish. And again, this is something that, again, we asked some of these questions early on in the polls, and I think this came back as certainly one of the reasons I added it was because this is an area that I often struggled with. So I can see where everyone is in the process. That has to be the objective. And that's all about getting visibility for when the process is ready for the next step and when things are completed, so we know whether I'm looking at complete information or not. The benefits are it means I know who to nag and when, and that's always been one of the things that has challenged me in the budgeting processes where I've worked, is that, I call somebody up and I say, hey, how are you getting on with that budget? It's due on Friday. How are you getting on? Oh, yeah, I've been working on that budget for weeks. Oh, yeah, it's almost done. And then come to find out they've never even opened the spreadsheet. They had they have loads of questions. They didn't allow time to answer them. And I can't actually see what their progress is. Also, I want to make sure that we can lock down those budgets when closed. That's a real benefit to being able to have a controlled process so that people aren't just willy-nilly entering budgets anytime they want to. There's actually a start and a stop. And that keeps the whole process moving smoothly so that it finishes faster, which achieves the goal of over 80% of the people on this call of actually being able to speed up their budgeting cycles. So John, I think you're going to show a little bit about this, right?
Absolutely, and I can attest to exactly what you said. I experienced the same pain trying to understand as a budget administrator where in the process everyone was standing. So the way we do that today in Insight, we have a cycle status button that I can quickly key on that will tell me that information. So last part of the scenario here is that I'm done entering my budget information, so I'm going to go ahead and finalize those results. And what that's going to do is make sure that none of the information changes from this point on. So now when I go ahead and try to enter budgets, I can no longer do that. Insight's going to control that and make sure that nothing changes. But I need to also look at it from an approver perspective. Now that a contributor has made their submissions, it's time for those submissions to either be approved or rejected. And so we've already talked about how you can set up specific approvers. An approver is going to go ahead and open up the cycle status dialog window, and they're going to see all of the participants in this budget activity. So let's go in and say that I'm Phil Smith, and I can look at my role here as controller, approver, and contributor, and I can see that I've made submissions and finalized this budget webinar form. Now I can approve or reject. You'll see that it highlights here. either one of these will, if you hit the reject button, it will open up that form and allow the user to go back in and make changes. Or you can hit the approve button. Are you sure you want to approve that? Yes, I am. And there you can see that the form has now been approved and when that approval took place. All right. Maybe we're only interested in looking at approved reports, so I'm going to go ahead and move that dialog box down. These are all of the submissions that have been approved, and very easily I can see here what's been approved and what needs to potentially be uploaded into JD Edwards. Again, I don't have to, but I do have that option to upload. All I need to do is go in here and click on my form and upload using this icon on the ribbon. And what that will do is load it directly into JD Edwards, into the ZTable, and be available for use through any other reporting that you might have that exists in JD Edwards but may not have been replicated over in Insight. But again, we're taking all of that data and we're publishing it to your single source ERP, and we're keeping it all consistent and centralized in either our Insight Activities dialog window or up into JD Edwards. And that's kind of the key control and workflow process.
Excellent. So moving right along, I'm going to toggle back over here to the PowerPoint. And the last step, or the last secret for the quick and painless budgeting process, is being able to directly upload into the JD Edwards ERP system. And there's been a question, so I think it's worth taking a second just to answer it. You know, what if we have some parts of our organization that are on JD Edwards and other parts that aren't? What's interesting is we have customers, John, I think you have some experience with this, that actually use the budgeting functionality to capture basically balances from external business units, or kind of, well, I should say companies or business units or departments or divisions that aren't on JD Edwards. And then that brings it all into a central place, into Insight reporting, where they can report on that.
Yeah, I think I can speak to that real quickly. Typically, you'll at least have available to you a trial balance from that other enterprise that's not currently in JD Edwards. Using Insight, you can very easily copy that trial balance and paste it right into a custom ledger that's stored in Insight, and then you can report on it like any other ledger. So you can consolidate with it, or you can exclude it from reporting requirements, whatever you need. But very easy to put that in consolidations now using a custom ledger.
So when we talk about the upload part, we're actually looking specifically at budgeting now. And what does that mean from a budgeting perspective? Well, we know that customers want to be able to have the option to use JD Edwards as the single source of truth. Now, certainly if you are doing forecasts, or if you're doing multiple iterations of an annual budget and you kind of have a review cycle or an original, and then maybe you're doing some review to that and some adjustments, and then you get to a final budget, you may only want to load that final budget into JD Edwards. Ultimately, you may choose not to load any into JD Edwards. But a lot of our customers do that. And so when that happens, you want to be able to allow the business to upload that information without needing to have technical experience and technical expertise. Now, since I was in IT, I think that's a great idea. I'm all over letting the business users upload in a controlled and safe manner, and basically me not messing around with spreadsheets for 2 weeks. That would be wonderful. The real benefits, of course, are first that it maintains the integrity of JD Edwards. So, you know, when users are kind of left to their own devices, and they're given more technical tools than they really are comfortable with having, that can result in a lot of erroneous data getting loaded into JD Edwards. Also, if I have third-party tools that don't use standard JD Edwards protocols, that's also quite risky. We want to ensure that the ERP has a complete picture so that we can look at our actuals and budgets. Now, as John was pointing out, as soon as I put that information in an Insight ledger, I have a complete view in Insight. So I can look at any of that budget information anytime, any of my forecasts anytime, and I can report on those forever if I want to. So that information is all saved and stored, and I can choose to additionally upload it to JD Edwards, and certainly I can purge it out of Insight if I don't want it there anymore. And I also want to be able to make those budgets accessible in JD Edwards. So if you're looking at a standard JD Edwards inquiry screen, you may want that budget information in there. Fair enough. This is a great way to get that information loaded. So I'm going to toggle over because I think this is worth...
No,
oh, sorry, John.
I already summed it up on the previous examples, so I don't have anything else to add to it. I think you summed it up perfectly. Putting it into JD Edwards is an option. It's a good option if you need to, but not necessarily a requirement.
Perfect. So when you look at this from an Insight budgeting perspective and you go to actually upload that, I think, we used to do this great thing when we would show the upload feature where we would go in and we go, okay, now everybody pay close attention, don't risk it, I want everybody to be watching. You click a button and then you get a little message back that says, here's the file that, here's the number that we uploaded. It goes into the ZTable, which is the standard upload protocol. And we also, you've seen John using some of our templates in Insight Budgeting and Insight Reporting, which looks at the balances of JD Edwards. Well, we also have a template that looks at that ZTable. So I can actually see the results of what I've uploaded in JD Edwards, again, right in real time, right out of Insight Reporting. And that is all about being able to just see that process from start to finish and to really feel like you have control over it and you can monitor it and manage it and kind of own it.
Yeah, I think I would like to show real quick just an example of that final upload, what tools we've provided to review that. So I'm going to show just briefly here. We've added a new template called Balanced Batch Upload, FO902Z1, which allows you as a user to review the data that's in JD Edwards in your ZTables. I don't necessarily care what's in the ZTable environment today, but I just wanted you to see that you now have a tool set that not only you can use for Insight Budgeting, but any uploads that you're using a ZTable for, or this particular ZTable for, you can view using Insight.
Yeah, and so we'll call that a bonus. So just a second, we've got our screens going on to pause and we're not really sure why, but we're going to try to take that off pause here for just a second. It might just be because I clicked on it one too many times. Let's not rule that out. Did I say I was in IT? I was really more of a business person myself, but
we're professionals, but not.
It makes it more entertaining for you, the audience. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we'll toggle back over. We just have a couple more slides, and we've left some time here for questions at the end. So first, what I want to do is just kind of summarize all of it. So Insight Budgeting, and we know that there's been some requests, of course, to just kind of have a start to finish demonstration just of Insight Budgeting. We wanted to give everybody a chance to highlight, or give us a chance to highlight what we thought kind of the quick and painless benefits are for Insight Budgeting, but we know that there's been a request for that, so we'll work to get that scheduled. Some of the benefits that our customers have experienced with Insight Budgeting are, of course, time savings. And we know that's something that everybody is looking for, is an opportunity to expedite their budgeting process, to make it a smoother transition, to increase the accuracy of those budgets so that their business is running with all the right information. To have continuous budgeting, like you saw, a lot of people are on annual budgets, but everybody really wants to be able to move to forecast. They want to be able to do this at least monthly, if not, quarterly at a minimum, so that they can constantly be interacting with that data. And that's part of what Insight Budgeting provides, is the ability to do that continuous budgeting. And last but far from least is that they can have some happy budgeting users. And that means that people are more invested in the process and are more involved. So I'm going to toggle over to our last slide, and we're going to go into questions in just a second. But before I do that, I want to say first that we have an upcoming webinar that's going to be scheduled here shortly. Flint Energy, one of our budgeting customers, who's been working with us as a community preview customer during our creation of a lot of this new functionality for budgeting in our summer 2011 release, is going to be providing a customer interview, and that's coming up in the next couple of weeks. So you'll be getting an invitation for that, and we hope that you'll take time to join that. We've got actually, I think, 3 people from Flint Energy that are going to be on that call, and it's going to be moderated by one of our Insight employees to ask them some questions about their experience. It's not a demonstration, it's just them talking about why they've done what they've done, why they selected Insight Budgeting, how it's changed their budgeting process, what they like about it. And so that's coming up. And then, of course, based on popular request, we'll also work to set up a budgeting demonstration as well. So now's your chance to type in additional questions. And I'm going to look through these and answer some of the questions out loud that we've had historically. So give me just a second. If you're an existing customer, we have some existing customers. You're all quite anxious to play with this and to make sure that you have a chance to look at budgeting. I'll have your account managers give you a call. No worries about that. So that's a general message out to everybody. And let me just scroll through some of the questions. We got some great feedback actually early on. People are doing rolling forecasts. People are doing some monthly forecasting with raw materials and sales. People are struggling with iterations because they've got multiple iterations of the budget, and the setup is very hard for them. And then reforecasting sales on a quarterly basis, so very common, I think, very typical. Let's see, I'm just scrolling through these again. Please feel free to add additional questions. You can, of course, print comments. I think we talked about that, and those comments are saved as part of the report. And we talked a little bit about forecasting. John, do you have anything special to add about estimate to completions?
From a job costing perspective, one of the challenges that people suffer from is the ability to update job forecast total cost projections. And using an Insight ledger to hold incremental changes in your job forecast, you can quickly and easily update that information and get real-time, up-to-the-minute job cost projections as you need them or as the economy changes.
There's a question as well about what areas of budgeting Insight Budgeting supports. Currently, we support job cost and GL balance budgeting. Obviously, there are a few customers out there who do advanced cost accounting, and JD Edwards doesn't have a great facility right now for loading in those budgets into advanced cost accounting other than doing kind of journal entries and transactions. So right now, there's nothing in Insight Budgeting that really kind of supports that other than just providing some exceptional ACA reporting that you can use to help determine that and to help create those. But yeah, that's not something right now. ACA isn't part of Insight Budgeting. And then again, just looking down, there was a question about rolling up comments. You can certainly put comments at a subtitle level or a subtotal level, but those comments are saved as part of the actual budget form so that you can have different comments on different forms for different purposes. And that's part of why we've built it that way. Certainly, we weren't showing the subsidiary count. There's a question about being able to budget at the object and subsidiary level. People are paying close attention, so credit to you. Well done. What we want to say about that is we actually are budgeting at the object and subsidiary level. Ours just happened to be blank. We were hiding that column because it made it prettier to show on our screen, and we're nothing if not all about making it pretty. Is that right, John?
That is true. And I guess along those lines, we are doing particular validation of the data that we're entering. So that means Insight will not allow you to enter in budget information if a specific business unit object subsidiary account does not exist. So I think along those lines, we're incorporating subsidiary very well.
Perfect. And there's another question here about if we do job cost budgeting, can we cross fiscal years? Can you budget to a project? And of
Yes,
course you can. Absolutely. We have quite a few job cost customers that do just that.
Certainly.
And certainly the other thing about Insight Budgeting that we didn't mention but is definitely worth noting is that we talked about the budget forms and getting those budgets in, but just by having Insight Budgeting, you actually have Insight reporting for job cost and for GL. So you get all that reporting and all that slicing and dicing capability that's inherent within having budgeting. So kind of a bonus there, I suppose. There was also a question about being able to budget in multiple currencies. So if you have companies that are working on different currencies, you absolutely can enter your budgets in the base currency of that company. And we actually have restatement functionality in Insight reporting, and that restatement functionality uses the restatement rates in JD Edwards and can apply that to any ledger, whether it's an Insight ledger or a JD Edwards ledger. You can apply that restatement information and see those currencies restated. And then can you combine multiple ledgers together? Yes, you can. There was a question about having somebody maintain two separate budgets for a project, and they wanted to be able to combine those budgets together for a single view, and you absolutely can. You just add up your two ledgers. No problem there. And just scrolling down to look at some additional comments, I realize we're coming up to the top of the hour. You're doing a great job of paying attention. We'll rush through these as fast as we can. We want to make sure we answer as many as possible. If something in the process has been rejected, in the approve and reject process or the approval process, if it's rejected, you can send a notification back to the contributor to let them know that their budget was rejected along with some justification or text. You can even add a comment directly to the budgeting form. And that user is now unlocked and able to start to change and update those budgets and can resubmit them to the approver. So rejection is just a step in the process. It's not the end of the world. And looking again, there's a question about, do you have to budget by month? You can actually budget by year. JD Edwards supports both annual and period level budgeting, and so do we. And then, yes, it works on both JD Edwards World as well as Enterprise One XE. And it will work on A7 III. And I'm just gonna say that A73 is not that old of a version. I actually worked on older versions of World, so don't feel sad. We do support that. And can we upload as many budgets as we want to in JD AdWords? You betcha. There's no charge per upload or anything. You just knock yourself out and upload as many as you'd like. And can you create ledgers in Insight that never get created in JD AdWords? Absolutely. You can work standalone just in Insight. And again, you can choose to upload one, none, or all of the ledgers that you create in Insight. And how do the actual numbers get into Insight? The actual numbers, so we actually connect up to JD AdWords through a JDBC connection. And that's how we pull the information. It's kind of a plug and play, takes about an hour to install, leverages the JD AdWords security, understands the data dictionary, all those pieces and parts. So that's how we get the actual numbers from JD AdWords. And there is absolutely an in-depth user guide and a manual. And then we were showing the summer 2011 release. This is a community preview build. So we'll have somebody contact you if you want some additional information. You can also just let us know. You can type in a question or send us a chat message and we'll make sure we have somebody contact you. There's no limit to how many scenarios can be saved. You can save as many what-if scenarios as you want. And just scrolling through these questions.
Keep coming.
Yeah, well, you guys are very attentive. And yes, you can enter multi-year budgets. And I think that covers kind of the big ones. There's still some outstanding questions. If we haven't gotten to them, we will definitely follow up with answers to those questions. Again, I just want to be respectful of everybody's time. We've gone a couple minutes over, and I thank you for that. If you have additional questions, please feel free to type them in. We'll leave the webinar open for a couple of minutes, just so everybody can type in questions. We'll make sure we get back to you. We want to thank everybody for your attendance. You've obviously been a great audience. Thanks for answering the poll questions at the beginning. We look forward to seeing you on another webinar. Thank you all very much for attending. This concludes the webinar.